Hey there, friends. Thanks so much for being here. Your presence means the world. If you enjoy mythology, epic stories, and deep retellings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new adventure. Labor Eye, the Nemean lion. Among all the legends whispered across ancient Greece between the murmurs of olive groves and the echo of marble temples, none held the same mixture of awe, fear, and admiration as the tales of Hercules, the son of Zeus, and the mortal woman Alcmene. His name alone was enough to silence a noisy marketplace or make children sit straighter beside the evening fire. For his life was shaped not merely by strength, but by suffering, endurance, and a destiny carved by the hands of gods. Before his heroic labors began, Heracles lived as a man torn between two worlds, the mortal and the divine. His divine father granted him unparalleled might, yet the envy of Hera, the queen of the gods, haunted him from infancy. It was she who sent serpents to kill him in his cradle, and he who crushed them effortlessly. It was she who later clouded his mind, driving him into a madness that made him commit an unforgivable crime, harming his own family. When his mind cleared and the weight of what he had done fell upon him, Heracles sought purification and penance. The oracle of Delphi, speaking with the voice of Apollo, declared that he must serve King Eurystheus of Mycenae and complete whatever tasks the king demanded. Only then would his soul be cleansed. Eurystheus, a petty man terrified of Heracles' strength, saw an opportunity not to purify the hero, but to destroy him. And so, with a mixture of cowardice and cunning, he devised the first of 12 seemingly impossible trials, to kill the Nemean lion and bring back its impenetrable hide. Heracles set out at once, knowing the path ahead would test not only his power, but his will and his very humanity. The approach to Nemea. The journey to the region of Nemea took several days, each step carrying Heracles deeper into a land gripped by fear. Along the way, shepherds and travelers warned him of the beast. Their descriptions varied, but all agreed on one thing. The lion was no ordinary animal. Many claimed it was the offspring of Typhon and Echidna, or that it had fallen from the moon, sent by the goddess Selene. Others whispered that its golden fur could not be pierced by metal, bone, or stone. Heracles listened, but he did not waver. One evening, as he neared the outskirts of Nemea, he found shelter with an old shepherd named Molorkos. The man recognized him immediately, for fame travels faster than storms. "You must not go farther, Heracles," Molorkos warned, setting a clay cup of watered wine before him. "That monster is not like the creatures you've slain. Swords bend on its hide. Arrows break. Many brave warriors lie in its shadow, never to return." Heracles bowed his head respectfully. "I thank you for your warning," he said, "but I must face whatever fate demands of me." The old man sighed deeply. "Then let me make an offering to Zeus on your behalf," he said. "If you return alive in 30 days, I shall sacrifice a young ram in joyful thanks. But if you do not return, then I will sacrifice it in mourning." Heracles agreed, and early the next morning, before the sun had yet painted the mountains with gold, he resumed his journey. He walked alone through silent valleys where even birds dared not sing. The first sight. The land of Nemea felt abandoned by the warmth of the world. Trees grew twisted. Animals fled long before Heracles came into sight, and the air carried an uneasy stillness. It was as though nature itself feared attracting the lion's attention. Heracles followed the enormous tracks embedded in the soft earth prints, so large they could have belonged to a creature twice the size of any lion known to man. And then, as he turned toward a rocky slope, he heard it. A deep, resonant growl that vibrated through the stones beneath his feet. The lion stepped into view. It was unlike anything Heracles or any mortal had ever seen. Its body was enormous, its muscles rippling beneath a coat of shimmering golden fur. Its mane glowed like a crown of fire. Most terrifying were its eyes, dazzling, unnatural, burning with an intelligence that felt almost human. Heracles reached for an arrow. He nocked it calmly, inhaled, and let it fly. The arrow struck the lion directly in the chest and bounced off, as harmless as a twig cast against bronze. The lion blinked, unfazed. Another arrow, and another. They clattered against its hide like raindrops. Then, with a thunderous roar that shook the trees, the lion leapt forward. Heracles barely had time to roll aside as the massive claw swept past him, tearing through a boulder as though it were soft clay. Dust clouded the air. Heracles rose to his feet, pounded with adrenaline, and swung his heavy wooden clubber weapon carved from the trunk of an olive tree. The blow landed squarely on the lion's skull. The beast stumbled, dazed for a moment, but its hide remained unbroken. Then it turned its furious gaze on Heracles. The fight had truly begun. A battle of titans. The lion charged, faster than any creature of its enormous mass should have been. Heracles dodged left, then right, striking where he could. But the lion's skin was invulnerable. The pelt turned aside every blow. But Heracles was no ordinary man. He was a warrior, forged by godly blood and relentless hardship. He seized the right moment, swinging his club again with terrifying force. The impact echoed like thunder. For a fleeting second, the lion faltered. Heracles pressed forward, but the lion rebounded with a feral, explosive strength, slashing its claws so close to Heracles' throat that he felt the wind of their passage. The hero stumbled back, his muscles burning, and realized that brute force alone would not win the day. The lion roared triumphantly and bounded into the forest, perhaps to circle behind him. Heracles, breathing hard, surveyed the terrain. He remembered the words of Melorkos, "Swords bend on its hide." He had seen the truth of that already. If he wished to survive, he would need a different strategy. He followed the lion's tracks carefully. They led toward a pair of caves, two adjoining entrances, carved into a rock face like twin mouths of the underworld. Travelers had spoken of these caves. Legend said the lion used them as both lair and passage, allowing it to vanish when cornered and ambush would-be hunters. A plan formed in Heracles' mind. The trap Heracles gathered boulders, massive stones, that no normal man could have lifted alone, and pushed them toward one of the cave entrances. Sweat rolled down his arms. Dust coated his skin, and the effort strained even his tremendous strength. But at last, with a final shove, one entrance was blocked. The lion, watching from the shadows, growled softly, as if recognizing the trap too late to avoid it. Heracles stepped inside through the remaining opening. The cave swallowed him in darkness. For a moment there was only the sound of dripping water, the faint rustle of gravel beneath his feet, and the slow, measured breath of the beast somewhere in the blackness. Then 2 golden eyes flared open. The lion lunged. Heracles barely dodged in time. Its claws scraped sparks from the stone walls. The enclosure amplified its strength. Its massive body filled nearly the entire tunnel. There was no room to swing his club now, and that was when Heracles understood. The key was not to strike the beast from outside, but to get close enough to take away its greatest advantages, its speed and the protection of its hide. He let the club fall. The lion pounced, jaws wide, aiming for his throat. Heracles moved with impossible speed, throwing himself against the side wall and twisting his body so that he ended up behind the lion. Before the beast could turn, Heracles leapt onto its back and seized it around the neck. The lion reared, slamming him into the ceiling and scraping him against the walls. Pain seared through his shoulders, ribs, and spine, but he held on. His arms locked around the beast's throat like iron bands. The lion bucked and writhed. Heracles squeezed harder. Again the lion hurled him, trying to crush him. Dust rained from the ceiling. Rocks cracked. Still he held on. The lion's roars grew strained. Its movements slowed. Its body trembled under the crushing pressure of Heracles' arms. Then, with a final violent shudder, the beast fell still. Heracles remained atop the body for several long breaths, making certain the creature was truly dead. Only when silence filled the cave did he release his grip. The hide that would not be cut. Dragging the enormous beast out into the daylight, Heracles examined it more closely. Its hide gleamed like burnished gold. It truly was unpierceable. Eurystheus had demanded that Heracles return with the skin as proof, but no blade would cut it. Even the sharpest knife slid across it as though skimming polished marble. Heracles frowned. There had to be a way. Then he noticed something. The claws of the lion were sharper than any weapon forged by man. With them, the beast must have torn through armor, bone, and shields with ease. Heracles tested the idea. He scraped one of the lion's own claws against its fur. The hide split instantly. It was the lion's own weapons that defeated its invincible body. Using this method, Heracles skinned the beast, working patiently until he had removed the entire pelt. He draped it over his shoulders as a cloak and fashioned the head into a helm. It fit him perfectly, as though the gods had always intended him to wear it. From that day on, the Nemean lion's hide became Heracles' signature armor, impenetrable, eternal, a reminder that he had conquered what no other mortal could. Return to Mycenae. When Heracles returned to Eurystheus' palace, the king did not greet him with triumph or joy. Instead, the sight of the hero towering in the doorway, draped in the golden lion's skin, sent Eurystheus into a panic. He shrieked, stumbled backward, and leapt into a bronze storage jar, slamming the lid over his head. For several moments, the palace guards exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, a trembling servant cracked open the lid of the jar. "Is he gone?" came Eurystheus' muffled voice. "No, my king," the servant replied, "but he is the one who completed your task." Eurystheus peeked over the rim of the jar, saw Heracles still standing there, and immediately sank back inside. "From now on," he squeaked, "he may not enter the city gates. Orders are to be delivered from a safe distance." Heracles said nothing. He bowed his head slightly, adjusted the lion skin on his shoulders, and walked away. The first labor was completed, but 11 more awaited him, each more dangerous than the last. Labor 2, the Lernaean Hydra. If the slaying of the Nemean lion had shown the world the raw strength of Heracles, the second labor would reveal something far more essential: his endurance, his adaptability, and his ability to face terror, not meant for mortal eyes. For the Hydra of Lerna was not a mere monster. It was a living curse, a manifestation of ancient fear and divine hatred. This labor, too, had been chosen carefully by King Eurystheus, whose trembling hands still remembered the imposing sight of Heracles wrapped in the lion's golden hide. Determined to destroy the hero without dirtying his own hands, he consulted oracles, priests, and whispering seers. From them, he learned of a creature spoken of only in the oldest stories, a beast said to be spawned from the depths of the underworld itself. And so Eurystheus commanded, "Go to the swamps of Lerna and destroy the Hydra." The king said nothing of the countless warriors who had vanished into those marshes, nor did he mention the stench of death said to hang over the waters, or the serpent heads capable of striking faster than lightning. For if Heracles perished there, Eurystheus would never have to look into those mighty, lion-shadowed eyes again. Heracles accepted the task without hesitation. The swamps of Lerna lay far to the south, a place whispered about in taverns and shunned even by seasoned hunters. The landscape changed as Heracles approached. Healthy olive groves gave way to gnarled, rotting stumps. Crisp air turned thick with humidity. Vibrant birdsong faded into the croaking of unseen creatures lurking beneath stagnant water. By the time he reached the edge of the swamp, the sky had darkened, not from sunset, but from heavy, brooding clouds that never seemed to move. The ground quivered underfoot, a mixture of mud and decaying plant life. Heracles stepped forward cautiously, his lion skin pulled tight around his shoulders. For hours he searched, listening to the buzz of insects and the faint hiss of distant reeds swaying in unnatural wind. Then, as he reached a glade where the swamp opened into a small clearing, he discovered the remains of what once might have been a shrine. Broken pillars jutted from the muck like the ribs of a long-dead titan. Something moved beneath the surface of the water. Slowly, the marsh began to bubble. Heracles raised his club, and then the Hydra emerged, a creature of pure nightmare. The Hydra's colossal bulk rose from the swamp with a slithering, sucking sound. Its massive serpentine body glistened black and green with the murk of centuries. But it was the heads that defined the creature nine in total, though ancient songmasters disagreed on whether the number was fixed or shifting like a dream. Each head was nearly the size of a man's torso, with jaws lined by venom-dripping fangs. Their necks writhed and coiled over one another in an endless, mesmerizing knot of scales. The stench of rot seeped from its breath, a mixture of poison, death, and something older than the world of men. When the Hydra saw him, its many mouths hissed in chorus, a sound that made the hairs on Heracles' arms stand erect. Even for a hero blessed by Zeus, this creature was not one to confront lightly. But Heracles did not falter. He tightened his grip on his club and strode forward. The first clash. The Hydra struck without warning. One head lunged straight at Heracles, its jaws snapping shut so fast the air cracked like a whip. He pivoted and brought down his club in a smashing arc. Bone shattered. The head crumpled and fell into the sludge. For a moment, the entire swamp fell silent. Then the Hydra's wound bubbled, sizzled, and from its bloody stump, 2 new heads burst forth, each shrieking with malice, each snapping at him with renewed hunger. Heracles stepped back, stunned. He had known the beast was dangerous. He had not expected it to grow stronger with every blow. Another head lunged, then another. Heracles fought with all his speed, strength, and battle-honed instinct. He crushed skulls, split jaws, shattered vertebrae. But every time one fell, 2 more rose in its place. The Hydra's hissing chorus grew deafening. All the while, the creature pushed him back deeper into the swamp. Mud clung to his legs. Poisonous vapors rose around him, making his throat burn. The Hydra was not merely trying to devour him. It was trying to drown him in sludge and fumes. For the first time since his labors began, Heracles realized he might truly die. Hera's interference. From the heavens, hidden among thick clouds, another watcher observed the battle. Hera. She despised Heracles more deeply than any other mortal child of Zeus. And though the Hydra was already meant to be his doom, she decided to add her own venom to the trial. She summoned a monstrous crab from the depths of the sea, a creature as large as a war chariot, encased in a shell tougher than bronze. It scuttled toward the swamp on spiked legs, its claws clacking with hunger. As Heracles fought the Hydra's ever-growing heads, the crab seized his ankle and snapped down with crushing force. Pain lanced through him. The Hydra reared forward, 9 heads striking at once. Heracles ripped his leg free, smashed the crab with a single swing of his heel, and sent it rolling across the mud in pieces. Hera's fury echoed in the sky like distant thunder. But Heracles was not saved. The Hydra pressed on, relentless. He swung, he struck, he stomped through the swamp. But every action made things worse. The creature filled the clearing with hissing heads until he could barely move without being surrounded. The club was no longer an advantage. It was a liability. He needed a new approach. A faithful companion. Heracles called out into the darkness, "Iolaus!" From the edge of the swamp, a young man sprinted through the reeds. It was Iolaus, Heracles' nephew, charioteer, and trusted companion since childhood. Though Eurystheus had forbidden anyone to assist the hero, Iolaus had followed him anyway, unwilling to let his uncle face a monster whose legend chilled even the bravest warriors. "Uncle!" he shouted. "What can I do?" Heracles ducked beneath 2 lunging heads. "Fire!" he shouted. "Bring fire!" Iolaus understood immediately. He ran to the old shrine, where broken pillars and dried reeds offered plenty of material. Using flint, tinder, and the dry remains of long-dead offerings, he kindled a torch. Flames roared to life, bright, hot, and cleansing. Just as another Hydra head snapped toward Heracles' face, Iolaus hurled the torch at him. Heracles caught it. When he next smashed off a head, he pressed the blazing torch against the neck stump. Instead of sprouting new heads, the wound shriveled, cauterized, and sealed shut. Heracles grinned. The Hydra screamed. A strategy had been born, the burning of the Hydra. Together, the two worked in flawless rhythm. Heracles shattered a head. Iolaus burned the stump. Another head, another burst of flame. The swamp filled with smoke, steam, and the shrieks of dying serpents. Hydra blood sizzled on the ground, each drop dissolving reeds and soil. Heracles' hands blistered. Sweat dripped into his eyes. But he fought with the determination of a man who has already faced death and refused to bow to it. Head after head fell. One by one, the regenerative power of the Hydra was stripped away. At last, there remained only the central head, the immortal head, which no blade or fire could destroy. It lunged at Heracles with a speed unmatched by the others. Its fangs dripped poison so deadly that a single drop could kill a bull. Heracles avoided it by inches. Then he seized the monstrous neck with both hands, heaving with a strength that made his muscles bulge and his veins burn. He dragged the immortal head toward a boulder, lifted it high, and crushed it beneath the stone, pinning it deep into the earth. There it would remain, buried for eternity. The Hydra's enormous body convulsed violently, then collapsed into the swamp with a splash that sent toxic ripples spreading across the murky water. The beast was dead. The poisoned blood. The air hung thick with the smell of smoke and venom. Heracles breathed heavily, his chest rising and falling like the bellows of a forge. But he did not allow himself rest. He approached the Hydra's carcass cautiously. The oracle had once whispered that within every challenge lay a hidden advantage for the wise. And Heracles, though best known for his strength, was not lacking in cunning. He recognized the potency of the Hydra's blood, the same poison that had blackened trees, dissolved stone, and threatened his life. He dipped his arrows into the beast's venom. From that day forward, his arrows would become the most deadly weapons on earth. A single wound from them would be fatal. Some would later call this act foresight. Others would call it the beginning of tragedies yet to unfold. Returned to Eurystheus Heracles, and Iolaus returned to Mycenae. The people hailed them. Songs were sung. Children stared in wonder at the arrows slicked with dark, shimmering poison. But Eurystheus greeted the news with horror. He refused to let Heracles into the city at all, ordering his herald to meet the hero at the gates. And when he learned that Iolaus had helped in the fight, he seized upon it as an excuse to discredit the labor altogether. Heracles did not complete the task alone, the king proclaimed. Therefore, the labor shall not count. The people murmured in outrage. Heracles simply nodded, for he had expected no fairness from Eurystheus. The only justice he sought was redemption, and redemption could not be taken away by the jealousy of a weak king. 2 labors had come and gone. 10 more awaited him. Labor through. The Cerenaean hind. If the Nemean lion had tested Heracles' strength, and the Hydra his adaptability, the 3rd labor would test something far more subtle and far more difficult for a man forged in battle: restraint. For the Cerenaean hind, unlike the previous monsters Heracles faced, was not a creature meant to be slain. It was a sacred being, beloved of a goddess who did not forgive easily. And Eurystheus, in his relentless desire to destroy Heracles, had chosen this labor with a special kind of malice. He commanded, "Bring me the Ceryneian hind alive, not dead, not wounded, alive," knowing full well that capturing the creature without angering Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, would nearly be impossible. Heracles accepted the task quietly, though his heart grew heavy with the weight of it. There were many kinds of danger in the world, but none more delicate than offending a deity tied to nature, purity, and the moonlit forests. And so he set out toward the mountains of Chaeronea, where the hind was said to roam, a creature of divine beauty. The hind was no ordinary deer. It was one of the 5 sacred deer of Artemis, the fastest, most elusive creatures ever to walk the earth. Some said it had hooves of bronze that struck sparks when they hit stone. Others claimed its antlers were made of pure gold, gleaming like molten sunlight. Heracles had grown up hearing tales of the hind. He knew its nature, proud, swift, and almost supernatural in its grace. It moved between shadows like a whispered prayer. Hunters who had pursued it claimed that arrows could not catch it, that even the wind could not keep pace. Capturing such a creature without harming it was a task that required patience, not brute strength. And patience was an unfamiliar weapon for Heracles. Still, he began the hunt. A year-long pursuit. The chase took Heracles farther than almost any journey he had made before. He tracked the hind across mountains, valleys, rivers, and snow-dusted forests. Seasons changed. Leaves fell and grew again. Snow melted into spring waters. For nearly a full year, he pursued the sacred creature. Some nights he slept under the stars, watching constellations shift overhead. Other nights he rested in shepherds' huts, listening to stories of the hind passing by like a golden flash between trees. Whenever he came close enough to glimpse it, his breath caught. The creature was breathtaking. Its coat shimmered pale as moonlight. Its golden antlers shone like fire in the dark. But every time he reached out, it vanished again. Heracles was not angered by these failures. He felt humbled. Each time he approached the hind, he felt Artemis's presence in the rustling leaves, the cool air, the silver light of the moon. He knew he walked the boundary between mortal duty and divine territory. Still, he pressed on, for redemption demanded perseverance. The snaring of the hind. At last, one early dawn when the sky glowed faintly pink, Heracles found the hind drinking from a narrow stream high in the Arcadian mountains. It had not yet sensed him. He felt his heartbeat slow. He moved as quietly as drifting mist. He did not draw an arrow wounding the hind was forbidden. He needed a different method. Heracles had spent the long year learning its patterns, its favorite places, the ways it reacted to sound or scent. He had watched how it ran fluid, sharp, and impossibly quick. But he had noticed, too, that it sometimes doubled back upon its own trail, circling cliffs that left only a narrow space to escape. And here at the stream such a place existed. He waited, poised like a coiled spring. The hind lifted its head. In that single moment, Heracles lunged. The creature sprang forward, lightning on hooves, but Heracles was prepared. He cornered it between two jutting stones. The hind attempted to leap, golden antlers slicing the air, but Heracles was faster this time. He flung his arm out and seized it around the neck, not tightly enough to choke, but firmly enough to hold. The hind thrashed, powerful and wild. Its hooves struck sparks from the rocks, but Heracles held it as gently as he could, while still keeping it from escaping. He whispered, almost apologetically, "Forgive me. I am bound by labor and fate." And after a long struggle, the hind went still, breathing fast but unharmed. Heracles had captured it, alive, just as commanded, but fate was not finished with him yet. The arrival of Artemis Heracles began the journey back to Mycenae, guiding the hind with careful hands. He traveled slowly, not wanting to frighten or injure the divine creature. But as he descended from the mountains into a tranquil meadow, the air suddenly grew cold. The shadows deepened. The wind ceased. A silver glow spread through the branches, and a presence filled the glade, powerful, ancient, and unmistakably divine. Artemis had arrived. She stepped out from between two trees, as though she had been carved from moonlight. Her bow hung at her shoulder. Her eyes glinted with a mixture of fury and sorrow. And behind her walked Apollo, her twin brother, his expression equally stern. Artemis pointed her arrow directly at Heracles. "Release the hind," she commanded. Her voice was soft, yet it rang with authority strong enough to topple kingdoms. Heracles bowed deeply, his grip still gentle on the hind. "Goddess," he said in a steady voice, "I mean no sacrilege. I have not harmed your sacred deer." "You dare lay hands on what is mine?" Artemis's eyes flashed. "You dare steal from the huntress of the wild?" "I did not steal," Heracles answered. "I obeyed a command placed upon me by Eurystheus. He demanded that I bring him this creature alive." Artemis lowered her bow slightly, anger shifting into contemplation. "You are bound by your oath to him," Apollo said quietly. "And oaths, especially those spoken before the gods, cannot be broken lightly." Artemis studied Heracles, not just his body, but his intentions, his soul. She saw the truth there. He took no pleasure in this act. He carried the hind with respect, not conquest. At last she said, "Very well, but swear to me that once your task is fulfilled, you will return my hind to the wild." "I swear it," Heracles said without hesitation. Only then did Artemis step aside, allowing him to continue. Heracles bowed once more, humbled by the grace and mercy of the goddess. Eurystheus' disappointment. When Heracles arrived at Mycenae, Eurystheus was prepared to greet him with triumph, his own triumph, for he believed Heracles would fail and Artemis would destroy him. Instead, when he saw the living hind standing beside Heracles, his heart sank. He approached cautiously, afraid of its divine aura. This is the sacred deer of Artemis?" he stammered. "It is," Heracles replied. Eurystheus reached out greedily. "Give it to me," he said. Heracles hesitated. Then he remembered his oath. He loosened his grip on the hind just enough for it to spring away. It darted between the king's guards, leapt over the courtyard wall, and fled back toward the mountains with its golden antlers flashing in the sun. "You fool!" Eurystheus shrieked. "You let it escape!" "You asked me to bring it to you alive," Heracles said calmly. "You never said I needed to place it in your hands." The guards murmured. Some even hid their smiles. Eurystheus was red with rage, but he said nothing. He could find no fault with Heracles' obedience. The labor was completed. The meaning of the third labor. This trial taught Heracles several lessons he had never needed before. Strength is not always the answer. Sometimes patience achieves what brute force cannot. Respect for the sacred matters. Even the greatest hero must bow to the divine. A promise binds more deeply than command. His oath to Artemis shaped the outcome as much as Eurystheus' task. But most of all, Heracles learned that redemption was not only earned through battle, it was also earned through humility. And though Eurystheus seethed, the gods watched with growing interest. Heracles' journey was far from over. The next challenge awaited him. Labor 4, the Erymanthian Boar. If the first 3 labors had tested Heracles' strength, cunning, and restraint, the 4th labor would demand something else entirely. Endurance in the face of wild nature, and patience in the face of monstrous hostility, both human and divine. For the Erymanthian boar was not merely a beast. It was a living avalanche of fury, a creature whose thunderous charges caused even seasoned warriors to scatter like leaves before a storm wind. Yet Eurystheus, ever eager to see Heracles perish, declared, "Bring to me the Erymanthian boar alive." Another capture, not a killing. Another humiliation disguised as a task. And another chance, perhaps, for Eurystheus to watch Heracles fail. But Heracles, as always, bowed his head and accepted his fate. The land of Erymanthus. The boar dwelled on the slopes of Mount Erymanthus in Arcadia. A savage region thick with pine forests, icy streams, and deep ravines. The villagers who lived beneath the shadow of the mountain spoke of the boar in frightened tones. They said it was the size of a bull, with tusks sharp enough to pierce stone walls. When it charged, the earth trembled. When it squealed, wolves fled into their dens. Heracles traveled across rugged terrain, through winter winds that bit into his skin and snow that reached his knees. The lion's skin he wore protected him from the cold, but even he felt the sting of icy air on his face. As he ascended, the land became wilder still. Trees grew twisted, their trunks scarred by tusks. Boulders lay scattered in patterns that suggested they had been hurled aside by brute force. The closer he came to the boar's territory, the clearer it became that he was entering a natural battleground, the domain of a creature that feared nothing. A visit to Pholus. Before braving the snowy heights, Heracles sought shelter with a friend, Pholus the centaur, a wise and gentle being who lived near the mountain's base. Pholus welcomed the hero warmly. "Heracles," he exclaimed, "what wind drives you to these harsh slopes?" Heracles explained his mission. Pholus's brow furrowed with concern. "The boar is fierce," he said. "Even the bravest hunters avoid it." "I must capture it alive," Heracles replied simply. That night, Pholus offered him roasted meat and wine, but hesitated before opening the large clay jar that stood at the back of his cave. It was no ordinary jar. It belonged to all the centaurs, a vessel of sacred communal wine gifted by Dionysus. Pholus had long protected it, afraid to open it without the permission of his kin. But Heracles urged him gently. "Open it, friend. A little wine will not harm anyone. Let us drink in good company." Pholus relented. The moment the jar was opened, a rich and intoxicating fragrance filled the air, so potent that it wafted far beyond the cave and drifted into the nearby forests. And there it was caught by the nostrils of other centaurs. The centaur conflict. Nearby centaurs, smelling the divine wine, galloped toward the cave in agitation. They believed the jar was being stolen or misused. Their hooves thundered like drumbeats. Their voices rose in angry protests. Heracles stepped outside the cave to calm them, but one centaur, emboldened by fear and suspicion, hurled a stone. Another flung a spear. Soon the entire group charged. Heracles had no desire to harm them, yet he could not allow himself or Pholus to be trampled. He fired warning shots with his hydra-poisoned arrows aiming low, into the ground or into trees. But even the slightest scratch from those arrows was deadly. Several centaurs fell, writhing in pain, as the poison coursed through them. The others fled in terror, shouting curses to the heavens. Pholus, distressed by the violence, stepped outside to examine one of the fallen centaurs. He delicately pulled an arrow from the body only to drop it instantly, for the poison burned his hand. Shocked, he lost his grip. The arrow sliced his foot and delivered its fatal venom. Pholus collapsed. Heracles knelt beside his dying friend, grief heavy in his heart. The centaur whispered, "It was an accident, I know." Then the light faded from his eyes. Heracles buried him with honor before turning toward the snowy heights. The boar awaited him, and though sorrow weighed on his shoulders, he continued, because the path of redemption allowed no pauses. Into the snow. As Heracles climbed, winter thickened around him. Snowflakes drifted like pale feathers. The air was sharp enough to cut. His breath steamed in great clouds, and the landscape grew blindingly white. But he pressed on, listening for the rumbling sound of the boar's movement. Hours passed. The forest grew still. Then a shrill, piercing squeal tore across the mountainside. Heracles dropped to one knee, listening. The sound came again, closer. Then trees snapped like twigs in the distance. The boar was on the move. Heracles moved toward the noise, stepping lightly to avoid alerting the beast too soon. As he approached a ridge, he glimpsed it through the swirling snow. A colossal boar, its bristles thick like iron spikes, its tusks curved and gleaming like polished ivory. It snorted clouds of steam from its nostrils. Its eyes glowed red with feral rage. It pawed at the ground, scattering snow. Heracles steadied his breath. This was no ordinary hunt, the charge of the boar. He stepped out from behind a cluster of pines. At once the boar saw him and screamed. The mountain echoed with the sound. Then it charged. Its hooves ripped through snow and earth alike. Its tusks tore furrows in the ground. Heracles braced himself, then leapt aside at the last instant. The boar thundered past him, skidding on the icy slope. It turned with astonishing speed. Heracles dodged again. The boar was faster than he expected, stronger too. He knew then that a direct attack would be futile. He needed to tire the creature, weaken it, make it slip into the deep drifts where its weight would slow it. He taunted it, shouting loudly. The boar screamed in response and charged again. Heracles ran. He led the beast uphill, toward fields where the snow lay thick and treacherous. He jumped effortlessly from rock to rock, his lion skin flapping behind him. The boar struggled in the deepening snow. Then, at last, it stumbled. Its massive legs thrashed, but the snow held it like a trap. Heracles seized the moment. He rushed toward the struggling beast, grabbed it by the legs and tusks, and with overwhelming force heaped upon it the weight of his entire body. The boar squealed in fury, but it was caught buried in the snow up to its neck. Heracles wrestled it, wrapped ropes around its limbs, and bound it tightly without injuring it. The beast bucked and writhed, but Heracles pulled the rope taut until the boar finally stilled, exhausted. He had captured it alive, just as Eurystheus had demanded. The return to Mycenae Heracles dragged the bound boar down the mountain, following icy paths and thawed streams until he reached the farmlands below. Farmers gasped at the sight. Some fled, convinced they had seen a demon. Others laughed in amazement, running alongside the hero to marvel at his prize. By the time Heracles reached the gates of Mycenae, a crowd had gathered. "Stand aside," he called to the herald, "and summon Eurystheus." But the king, hearing that the boar had arrived, peeked from behind the palace walls with terror. He remembered the lion. He remembered the hydra's viscous poison. The thought of this monstrous boar filled him with dread. "Take it away," Eurystheus cried from behind a door. "Keep it far from me." But Heracles would not. He dragged the roaring, snorting boar straight into the courtyard, letting it thrash and squeal, until Eurystheus climbed into his infamous bronze jar and slammed the lid shut. Only then did Heracles laugh and tie the rope to a pillar so the beast could not escape. The people roared with delight. Even the guards chuckled behind their shields. Eurystheus, trembling inside his jar, eventually peeked out and shouted, "Fine, fine, this labor is complete. Just take it away." Heracles obliged. He brought the boar to a distant wilderness and released it. The animal, dazed and winded, fled into the underbrush, never again terrorizing the farmers of Arcadia. The meaning of the fourth labor. This labor, though it ended in triumph, left Heracles with many lessons. Nature cannot be conquered with strength alone. It requires persistence and respect. Grief and duty walk side by side. The death of Pholus weighed on Heracles' spirit. Even the fiercest creature can be subdued without being killed. But perhaps most importantly, Heracles learned that some battles are not fought against monsters, but against circumstance, against misunderstanding, accidents, and the harsh cost of being a hero. Yet he did not falter. 4 labors were done. 8 remained. Labor Viv, the Augean stables. If the previous labors had challenged Heracles with monsters, divine obstacles, and the wrath of nature itself, the 5th labor appeared at first glance to be something entirely different. No beast to slay, no sacred creature to capture, no venomous terror lurking in the shadows. Instead, Eurystheus gave Heracles a task that seemed almost insulting in its simplicity. Clean the stables of King Augeas in a single day. A humble job, a servant's chore, almost a mockery of Heracles' strength. And yet, beneath its humble appearance, the labor concealed a deeper cruelty. For Augeas's stables were infamous, legendary, utterly impossible. Eurystheus knew exactly what he was doing. The filth of 1,000 herds. King Augeas ruled over Elis, a fertile kingdom known for its vast herds of cattle, goats, and sheep. His animals were the finest in the land, strong, well-fed, and magnificent. But there were so many of them that the king's stables had not been cleaned for over 30 years. The result? A mountain range of filth, a swamp of manure, a stench so overpowering that even flies avoided the place. Some claimed that the dung had reached the rafters. Others said it had piled up into hills taller than a man. And because the herds continued to grow year after year, the accumulation seemed endless, a century's task, not a single day's. Eurystheus believed Heracles would be humiliated, exhausted, or suffocated in the process. But Heracles, as always, accepted without complaint. Heracles meets Augeas. Heracles traveled to Elis and approached King Augeas respectfully. The king was a wealthy man with a proud bearing, surrounded by servants and nobles. When he saw Heracles, a towering figure wrapped in lion skin, he raised an eyebrow. "What brings you here, son of Zeus?" Augeas asked. Heracles answered plainly, "I have been tasked with cleaning your stables in a single day." Augeas burst out laughing. "You? Clean? You are a hero, not a laborer." "It is my 5th labor," Heracles said. "If I accomplish it, will you reward me with 1/10 of your cattle?" Augeas scoffed. "A 10th? If you clean those stables in a single day, I will give you far more than that. It cannot be done. If you manage it, I will be glad to pay." Heracles noted the promise carefully. Augeas' son, Phyleus, who was present during the conversation, also heard the agreement. He watched Heracles with admiration unlike his father, who felt only confidence that the hero would fail. Augeas waved his hand dismissively. "Go then, if you wish. The stables are over there. Try if you must. You'll be begging for air before long." Heracles bowed and departed. But as soon as he walked out of sight, a thoughtful smile crossed his face. For he had no intention of shoveling manure, not when the rivers of Elis flowed so close. Strength of mind over muscle. The stables stood beside a wide pasture, backed by high stone walls that had long been blackened by the build-up of filth. Heracles inspected the structure carefully, taking note of the placement of walls, the slope of the ground, and the distance to the nearest water sources. To the north flowed the Alpheus River, swift and powerful. To the south, the Peneus, gentler but wide. Heracles had an idea. A wild, impossible idea, unless you were Heracles. He walked to the banks of the rivers and examined the flow. What if, instead of removing the filth, he moved the rivers? He found the perfect spot, a narrow channel between the hills where a controlled breach could be made. With the right angle, the combined waters of the two rivers could be redirected straight through the stables, washing away decades of filth in minutes. Heracles rolled his shoulders, stretched his arms, and got to work, rerouting the rivers. He began by choosing 2 points along the riverbanks, where the soil was soft, but the underlying stone was strong. Then he dug using only his hands and a shovel he fashioned from a broken plough. He carved enormous trenches, pulling up roots, prying loose boulders, and shaping the earth. His strength allowed him to move stones that would have taken 10 men to shift. His endurance let him dig without rest for hours. Villagers gathered to watch. "What is he doing?" they whispered. "Has he gone mad? Is he trying to break the river itself?" But Heracles ignored them. He dug and dug and dug. When the trenches were deep enough, he struck the riverbank with his shoulder, hard enough to crack the stone. Water rushed into the channel with a roar like thunder. The ground shook. The villagers screamed and scattered as the redirected river carved its new path. Then Heracles ran to the southern side and repeated the process, breaching the Peneus River. The two waterways merged into a single mighty torrent, and that torrent surged straight into the stables. The cleansing flood. The moment the water hit the mountains of filth, it exploded into a churning tidal wave of mud, straw, and waste. The stables, designed to withstand the weight of hundreds of animals, groaned but held firm as the torrent blasted through. Dams of manure broke apart and washed away. Rivers of foul sludge poured out into the fields. Decades of filth dissolved in moments. The smell, though terrible, was short-lived. The water swept everything clean. Heracles stood by the stable doors, observing with satisfaction as the last of the muck was carried away. When the flow weakened, he blocked the breaches using stones and earth, restoring the rivers to their original courses. By sunset, the stables shone like new, cleaner than they had ever been. Heracles wiped his hands, nodded with approval, and walked toward the palace of Augeas. The task had taken only a few hours. The dispute of Augeas expected Heracles to return defeated, exhausted, or covered head to toe in manure. Instead, the hero appeared clean, calm, and entirely victorious. Augeas' eyes widened. What happened?" he demanded. "Did you fail? Did you give up?" "No," Heracles said simply. "The stables are clean." Augeas scoffed, unwilling to believe it. He sent servants to inspect the site. When they returned, pale and astonished, confirming that the stables were indeed spotless, Augeas' mood darkened. He realized he had made a deal with a man far smarter than he expected. "You tricked me!" Augeas roared. "You used the rivers. That is not cleaning, it is cheating." Heracles' expression hardened. "You did not specify how I must clean them," he said. "Only that I must complete the task within a single day." Augeas refused to honor the agreement. "You shall receive nothing," he shouted. "Not a single cow." But Phyleus, the king's son, spoke up. "Father," he said firmly, "I was witness to your promise. You gave your word. Heracles completed his task." Augeas' face turned purple with rage. "How dare you contradict me?" he bellowed. "You side with a stranger against your own father? Out! Both of you! Out!" He banished his son from Elis and declared Heracles unwelcome as well. Heracles left in silence. He had completed the labor, but there was more to be settled. Return to Eurystheus. When Heracles returned to Mycenae and reported his triumph, Eurystheus grew furious. Not because the task was incomplete. Heracles had accomplished it perfectly, but because he had succeeded too cleverly. In rage, Eurystheus declared, "I will not count this labor. You accepted payment from Augeas." But Augeas refused to pay, Heracles replied calmly. It matters not, Eurystheus snapped. It is disqualified. Thus the fifth labor done brilliantly was denied. Heracles now had 7 labors completed, but only 4 counted. It was an injustice, but the hero merely nodded. He would continue. He would endure. For redemption was worth more than fairness. The meaning of the 5th labor. The Augean stables taught Heracles profound lessons. Strength is not the only form of might. Wisdom and creativity can accomplish what brute force cannot. Some rulers are more foul than beasts. Augeas' betrayal foretold the corruption of men, even more dangerous than monsters. A hero's honor is his own. Even when others deny it, the truth of one's actions remains. But perhaps most deeply, Heracles learned that not every victory would be acknowledged, yet every victory mattered. He carried that understanding into the labors ahead, and Eurystheus, growing desperate, planned a task designed to break Heracles entirely. Labor 6. The Stymphalian birds. If the Augean stables had shown Heracles' brilliance and ingenuity, Eurystheus decided the next labor must be one that even cunning could not solve. Something unnatural, airborne and deadly. Something that would reach Heracles from the sky, where no club, spear, or lion skin could protect him. Thus came the 6th command. Drive away the Stymphalian birds. At first it sounded simple. Chasing birds? Even large ones? Surely this was no labor compared to the Hydra or the Nemean lion. But those who lived near the marshes of Stymphalus knew the truth. These were not birds, not truly. They were horrors, creatures of bronze, creatures of blood, creatures of chaos sent by Ares himself, and Heracles would have to face them where they were strongest. Above him, the marsh of Stymphalus. The lake of Stymphalus lay hidden in the dense forests of Arcadia, surrounded by cliffs and marshland. The air there was unnaturally still. Trees grew tall and black, their branches tangled like skeletal fingers. Mist clung to the ground in swirling ribbons, obscuring the water below. No shepherd led flocks here. No fishermen cast nets. No villagers dared approach. For the Stymphalian birds had claimed the marsh, turning it into a landscape of death. When Heracles arrived, he walked cautiously, each step sinking into soft mud. The sound of buzzing flies and distant croaking filled the air, but beneath these came another noise, strange, metallic, rhythmic. A faint clatter, a whisper of metal scraping metal. Heracles tightened his grip on his bow. He scanned the trees. They were empty, too empty. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. He had reached their territory, creatures of Ares. The sky darkened suddenly. A shadow passed overhead, then another, and another. Heracles looked up. At first he saw only shapes large silhouettes, gliding on broad wings. But as they descended, the details sharpened. Wings tipped with bronze. Feathers sharpened like razors. Beaks of polished metal. Eyes glowing with feral, unnatural intelligence. The Stymphalian birds circled above the hero. Dozens of them, their shrill cries echoing across the marsh. They moved with a precision no natural flock possessed, turning as one like a formation of deadly arrows. Heracles fired an arrow. It struck a bird and bounced off its metal feathers. He frowned and fired again. The same result. Then the birds attacked. They dove from the sky, slicing through the air. Heracles raised the lion-skin shield just in time as a rain of sharp, metallic feathers showered down, embedding themselves in trees and rocks like deadly darts. The ground where he had stood moments earlier was pierced with dozens of razor-edged quills. Had he not moved, he would have been shredded instantly. Heracles realized with a sinking heart. He could not defeat these creatures with brute force. His arrows could not pierce them. His club could not reach them. And they could rain death upon him endlessly from above. He moved deeper into the marsh, seeking cover beneath the trees where their dive attacks were limited. But the birds perched in the branches, glaring with metallic eyes, waiting for him to expose himself. He needed a plan, a new weapon, a different kind of power. Athena's gift. As Heracles crouched beneath the shadows of the trees, breath steady and mind racing, the forest seemed to hush. The air shimmered faintly. A familiar presence filled the space around him, calm, wise, purposeful. Athena, the goddess of strategic warfare and wisdom, appeared beside him, though her form was like moonlight on water, brief, glimmering, and ethereal. "Heracles," she said, her voice firm but compassionate, "you cannot kill these birds by ordinary means. Their feathers are bronze, their bodies protected by Ares." Heracles bowed his head respectfully. "Then how am I to drive them away, Lady Athena?" Athena smiled slightly, as if pleased by his humility, even in the face of danger. She reached behind her and drew forth a small object round, bronze, and intricately carved. A crotala, a divine rattle crafted by Hephaestus himself. "When sounded," Athena explained, "its noise will terrify the birds, for it carries the force of the forge and the fear of fire. Use it well." She placed the magical rattle into Heracles' hands. Before he could speak again, she faded into light and vanished. Heracles examined the object. It was simple in appearance, but he sensed the power within it, like a storm waiting to be unleashed. He stepped out from the cover of the trees. He lifted the rattle, and he shook it. The terrifying sound. The sound that erupted was not the delicate clatter of a child's toy. It was thunder. It was metal striking metal. It was the roar of furnaces and the cry of beasts. It was war itself. The noise swept across the marsh like a shockwave. The Stymphalian birds froze, then screamed. Their formation shattered. They spiraled chaotically, wings beating with frantic force. The sound terrified them, cutting through their unnatural strength and breaking their murderous discipline. Heracles shook the rattle again, louder. The birds burst from the trees in a metallic storm. They ascended in panic, flapping wildly to escape the dreadful sound. Their screams echoed across the cliffs as they fled higher into the sky. Then, one by one, they turned away from the marsh and soared into the distance, vanishing beyond the horizon. The marsh fell silent. The danger was gone. Heracles exhaled. Athena's wisdom had once again saved him. A deadly aftermath. Though the birds had fled, the marsh bore the scars of their presence. Trees shredded by razor feathers. Ponds polluted with metal fragments. The carcasses of animals they had slain. Heracles collected several bronze feathers. They would later serve as proof for Eurystheus, and examined their edges. Each one was sharp enough to slice skin with the slightest touch. Even in defeat, the birds were dangerous. He gathered a bundle carefully and left the marsh. But the labor was not yet complete. Heracles traveled back across Arcadia, through forests and foothills, until he arrived once more at Mycenae, Eurystheus' hiding place. As soon as Heracles entered the courtyard, Eurystheus spotted the bundle of razor-sharp feathers and panicked. He shrieked, tripped over his own cloak, and sprinted toward his giant bronze jar, his favorite hiding place. He dove in head first and slammed the lid closed. "Is it safe?" came his muffled voice. "Completely," Heracles said flatly. "The birds have been driven away." Eurystheus peeked from the jar lid, his eyes darting nervously. "You? You drove them away? All of them?" "Yes." "Without killing them? Without being killed yourself? Without being shredded to ribbons?" Heracles raised an eyebrow. "That appears to be the case." Eurystheus groaned in frustration. "Fine, fine, the labor is complete. Just take those feathers away before I cut myself." Heracles left the feathers with the palace scribes as evidence and departed. The meaning of the sixth labor. This labor taught Heracles several profound lessons. 1. Not every enemy can be defeated through strength. The birds could not be slain by muscle or weaponry. Only strategy and divine aid prevailed. 2. Fear is sometimes a greater weapon than steel. The rattle evoked terror in creatures birthed from violence. 3. Even the smallest tool can hold immense power. The crotala was no sword, no club, yet it accomplished what armies could not. 4. Divine favor matters. Heracles learned that even in his suffering, not all gods wished him harm. 5. Victory sometimes lies in driving danger away, not destroying it. The marsh was safe, the people protected, and the labor fulfilled. As Heracles walked away from Mycenae, the air felt lighter for the first time in months. But Eurystheus was already plotting the next task, one that would take Heracles far from Greece, across the sea, into lands foreign and wild. A task involving monstrous bulls, defiant kings, and the fury of Poseidon himself. Labor 7, the Cretan Bull. By the time Heracles completed his sixth labor, Eurystheus had grown both terrified and desperate. Every creature the king sent Heracles to face lion, hydra, birds, fell before him. Every scheme failed. Every hope of seeing the hero perish slipped through the king's trembling fingers. And so, Eurystheus sought to send Heracles far away from Greece itself across the sea, to a land ruled by a prideful king and plagued by a creature born of divine wrath. His command was simple: bring me the Cretan bull alive. The same demand as with the Erymanthian boar: alive, bound, delivered. Except this bull was unlike any other. It was a creature with a history soaked in divine drama, royal arrogance, and secrets that even kings dared not speak aloud. And Heracles' journey would carry him into the heart of a kingdom torn between pride and fear. The origin of the bull. To understand the beast Heracles was sent to capture, one must know its origin. Long ago, King Minos of Crete prayed to Poseidon, god of the sea, for a sign of divine favor. A bull sent from the depths of the ocean. Poseidon obliged, sending forth a magnificent white bull, its hide shining like polished ivory, its horns sharp and golden like sunlight on the waves. But Minos committed a grave sin. Instead of sacrificing the sacred bull back to Poseidon, as he had promised, Minos kept it for himself, enchanted by its beauty and power. He offered another animal in its place, hoping the god would not notice. But gods notice everything. As punishment, Poseidon cursed the bull, filling it with unbridled rage and unnatural strength. It broke free from Minos' pastures, ravaged fields, destroyed crops, and terrorized villagers across the island. Worse, Poseidon's curse would eventually intertwine with a darker, more infamous tale, the origin of the Minotaur. But that was a horror for another time. For now, Heracles faced only the bull. And that was more than enough. Journey to Crete Heracles set sail from the Greek mainland aboard a small ship. The sea was calm at first, but as he approached the Cretan coastline, the waves rose ominously, as though Poseidon himself stirred beneath the water, testing the resolve of Zeus's son. The ship rocked violently. Spray drenched him, but Heracles stood firm on the deck, unshaken. At last, the vessel reached the shores of Crete. Heracles stepped onto the white sands, shaking seawater from his lion skin. Before him rose the palace of Knossos Grand, labyrinthine, with pillars painted red and black, and frescoes depicting dolphins, bulls, and dancing maidens. The island was beautiful, but tense, uneasy. People whispered in fear as he passed. They all knew the bull still roamed free. Meeting King Minos, Heracles entered the palace and bowed respectfully before King Minos, a tall, proud man, wearing a robe embroidered with golden spirals. "I am Heracles," the hero declared, "sent by Eurystheus to capture the Cretan bull. Grant me leave to pursue it." Minos studied him with sharp eyes. "You seek that creature," he said. "Then I see you are braver than most. The bull has destroyed orchards, smashed houses, and killed countless men. My own soldiers fear it. Even my priests have fled the temples." Heracles nodded. "Will you assist me?" Surprisingly, Minos shrugged. "Poseidon cursed the bull. I want nothing to do with it anymore. Do as you will. Capture it, kill it, or drive it into the sea. I only ask that you remove this burden from my island." Heracles bowed again, and thus the hunt began. The bull on the mountainside. The bull roamed the rugged highlands of Crete, where sharp rocks rose like the spines of ancient beasts, and winds howled through narrow passes. Heracles climbed the mountain paths, scanning the horizon for signs of the beast. He soon found them, deep hoofprints crushed into the earth, broken trees lying in splintered heaps, scorched patches of ground where the bull had snorted fire. Yes, fire, for the beast breathed flames like a creature of myth. Then, at last, Heracles saw it. The bull stood atop a ridge, white as moonlit marble, powerful as a storm cloud. Its eyes burned with fury. Steam curled from its nostrils. Its horns gleamed like golden spears. The beast pawed the ground. The earth trembled. Heracles stood tall. Their eyes met. The bull screamed and charged. The battle of strength. The bull descended the slope like a thunderbolt, hooves smashing stone, dust rising in a cloud behind it. Heracles spread his stance, arms ready. He waited, not fearful, but focused. At the last moment, he stepped aside. The bull thundered past, missing him by inches. It skidded, turned, and charged again even more furiously. Heracles rolled aside and grabbed its horn as it passed. The bull jerked violently, dragging him several steps before he regained his footing. Heracles dug his heels into the earth. The bull fought. Heracles matched it. The struggle was titanic, a contest of raw power and divine fury. Rocks cracked under their feet. Dust spiraled around them like a cyclone. Heracles wrapped his arms around the bull's neck and wrestled it, muscles bulging, veins straining. The bull roared and breathed a burst of flame. Heracles jerked his head aside. His lion skin shielded him from the worst of it. Then he heaved. With a roar of his own, Heracles twisted the beast's body and wrestled it to the ground. He pressed its head into the earth, avoiding the horns, using sheer weight and strength, until the bull at last stopped struggling. It panted heavily. Heracles tightened the rope around its neck and legs. The Cretan bull was captured, alive. Returned to Minos. Dragging the bull down the mountain was no easy feat. It fought, bucked, and snorted, but Heracles' grip held firm. When he reached Knossos, crowds gathered to cheer, marveling at the hero who had subdued the terror of their island. But Minos was less impressed. He watched Heracles approach with narrowed eyes. "You captured it alive," he said. "Impressive. Take it, then. My curse is now Eurystheus' burden." Heracles inclined his head politely. Then he led the bull to the coast, where another ship awaited. The creature snorted at the water, tossing its head, but Heracles coaxed it aboard. The journey back to Greece was chaotic. Several sailors nearly drowned when the bull broke its restraints and rampaged across the deck. Heracles spent most of the voyage wrestling the beast into submission again and again. The sea churned as though Poseidon were watching. But at last, Heracles reached the shores of Tiryns, and the bull's fate was sealed. Eurystheus' terror. When Heracles appeared with the bull alive, snorting, furious, Eurystheus reacted exactly as expected. He screamed. He ran. He dove headfirst into his bronze jar and sealed the lid. The guards stared, torn between amusement and fear, while Heracles stood patiently, holding the rope that bound the raging creature. A herald timidly approached the jar. "My king, Heracles has brought the Cretan bull." A muffled voice emerged. "Tell him to take it away. Take it away." Heracles complied. He released the bull, letting it flee across the plains of Greece. Some say the creature traveled north, eventually reaching Marathon, where it caused mischief until finally being slain by the hero Theseus. But that tale belongs to another age. For Heracles, the labor was done. Eurystheus, trembling, added it to the list-making 6 counted labors, though Heracles had performed more. The meaning of the 7th labor. This labor taught Heracles several things. 1. Divine anger lingers for generations. Poseidon's wrath turned a single bull into a symbol of chaos. 2. Not all kings are noble. Minos shirked his responsibility, letting his people suffer rather than facing his own broken promise. 3. Strength is not merely for killing. Capturing a creature of such violence required control, finesse, and endurance. 4. The sea itself can be an enemy. Heracles learned the danger of storms and divine grudges. 5. Eurystheus' fear was growing. With each labor completed, the king became more desperate and more unstable. Heracles had now journeyed across land and sea. faced monsters and kings alike, and proven his worth again and again. But Eurystheus was not done. Next, he planned to send Heracles into the realm of savage man-eating mares, ruled by a tyrant whose cruelty rivaled that of any monster Heracles had faced. The 8th labor was coming. Labor 8, the mares of Diomedes. With each labor completed, Heracles grew stronger, wiser, and more tempered, like a blade hammered beneath the will of the gods. Yet Eurystheus grew steadily more desperate. His fear twisted into cruelty, driving him to choose a task darker and more disturbing than any before. No monster of divine origin, no sacred creature, no majestic bull or impossible bird. This time, the terror Heracles would face was man-made. Eurystheus declared, "Bring me the mares of Diomedes." Not ordinary mares, not wild horses of foreign lands, but man-eating mares, creatures corrupted by cruelty, driven mad by fear and violence. Their master, King Diomedes of Thrace, was a harsh and ruthless tyrant, the son of Ares, god of war. His mares reflected his nature, savage, uncontrollable, and hungry for human flesh. To subdue them meant confronting not just animals, but the brutality of war itself. Heracles accepted the labor, though a shadow passed across his eyes. Journey to Thrace. Thrace lay far to the northeast, a harsh land of iron mountains, frozen plains, and warrior tribes who lived by their blades. Heracles traveled through snow-choked valleys and across rivers swollen with winter melt, the lion's skin wrapped tightly against the cold. As he approached the lands of Diomedes, he heard stories in every village of travelers who vanished upon the road, of screams echoing across the plains at night, of monstrous horses with fire in their eyes and blood on their teeth. Mothers shuddered and clutched their children. Old men whispered that even wolves fled from the stables of Diomedes. Heracles pressed on. His path led him to a fortified palace on the edge of the sea, where the tyrant ruled with a hand as iron as the chains of his mares. Who was Diomedes? Diomedes, king of the Bistones, was a man shaped by war and sharpened by cruelty. His hair was long and wild, his armor blackened with soot, his eyes fierce and unyielding. Some said he was half demon. Others claimed he was fully human, which made his cruelty even worse. The mares he kept were his pride. They were fed only human flesh. They were chained with bronze restraints. Their breath carried the smell of blood. Their eyes rolled with madness. Diomedes delighted in watching them devour prisoners. It was said that even Ares, his divine father, watched with approval. Heracles arrives at the stables. Heracles approached the enormous fenced enclosure where the mares were kept. The ground was scorched and bare beneath their hooves. Human bones lay scattered in the dust like broken shells. The stench of death hung in the air. 4 mares prowled restlessly. One jet black, its mane tangled and wild. One pale grey, thin but frighteningly alert. One chestnut, with scars covering its flanks. One white, its muzzle stained permanently red. When they saw Heracles, they screamed, high-pitched, unnatural, like metal scraping against metal. Their chains clattered as they lunged toward him, teeth snapping. Heracles knew at once. These animals were beyond ordinary control. They were living weapons. He studied the chains. He examined the enclosure. Most importantly, he looked for Diomedes. He knew the tyrant would come. Battle with the Bistones. Heracles waited until nightfall. Then he acted. He strode into the enclosure boldly, seized the chains, and with a roar of effort ripped the massive pegs from the ground. The mares shrieked with fury, rearing and kicking, but Heracles held firm, planting his feet like an ancient oak. Soldiers shouted from the walls, "Halt! Intruder! To arms!" The Bistones swarmed like hornets' dozens of warriors armed with spears, axes, and Thracian swords. They charged, forming a semicircle around the hero. Heracles set his jaw. He had not come here to slaughter men, but he could not allow himself to be cut down either. With a sweeping motion, he swung the chains, whipping them through the air. The iron links cracked against shields, scattering soldiers like children's toys. The mares, still bound to the chains, were dragged in a circle, snapping wildly at anyone who approached. Heracles roared, a sound so mighty that even the horses paused. Then he pulled the chains taut and began backing toward the sea. But the Bistones kept coming, and among them came Diomedes himself. The tyrant appears. Diomedes rode at the head of his warriors, mounted on a massive warhorse nearly as savage as the mares. His armor gleamed with blood-red streaks. His voice boomed across the battlefield. "Who dares steal the sacred beasts of Thrace?" "Heracles," the hero answered without hesitation. Diomedes' eyes narrowed. "You have courage and foolishness. Leave the mares, and perhaps I will let you live." Heracles' grip tightened. "I have come for them. Stand aside." The tyrant laughed a harsh, cruel sound. "These mares eat only the flesh of cowards and criminals. Tell me, Heracles, what will they make of you?" He spurred his horse forward, brandishing a spear. The battle erupted in a fury of steel. Diomedes thrust again and again, but Heracles dodged with fluid strength, wielding the heavy chain almost like a whip. At last, Heracles seized the tyrant by the armor and ripped him from his saddle. They crashed into the dirt, grappling like two lions in a pit. Diomedes fought savagely. He was, after all, a son of Ares. His strength was immense, his rage unmatched. But Heracles was the son of Zeus. No mortal or demigod could equal him in raw power. He pinned Diomedes to the ground. The tyrant snarled. Heracles looked down at him with grim resolve. "You have fed innocent men to these mares for years," he said. "Let the beasts judge your fate." And Heracles dragged Diomedes toward the enclosure. Justice for the mares. The mares screamed when Heracles approached with their master. Their nostrils flared. Their eyes burned with hunger and instinct. Diomedes thrashed in terror. "No! Release me! You cannot—" But Heracles did not falter. He cast the tyrant before the mares and stepped back. The beasts descended. It was not a death Heracles enjoyed watching, but it was a fitting one. The mares devoured Diomedes completely. And then something extraordinary happened. As the blood of their master filled them, the mares' strength ebbed. Their wildness diminished. Their frenzied eyes softened not fully, but enough for Heracles to control them. It was as if Diomedes' death severed the curse tied to his cruelty. Heracles seized their chains, calmed them with soft murmurs, and prepared to lead them away. The soldiers, seeing their tyrant dead, abandoned the fight. Some fled into the hills. Others fell to their knees in relief. Heracles left Thrace with the mares following obediently behind. No longer monsters, but powerful, fierce creatures in need of a gentler hand. Return to Mycenae. When Heracles brought the mares into the courtyard, Eurystheus's reaction was immediate and predictable. He screamed. He leapt into his bronze jar. He slammed the lid shut with a clatter. "Are they alive?" he cried from inside. "Yes," Heracles replied, "as you commanded. Take them away." Heracles shrugged, turned, and led the mares into the countryside. There he released them onto the plains of Argos, where they roamed freely until the end of their days, never again tasting human flesh. Eurystheus declared the labor completed, but the look on his face when he emerged from the jar revealed a single truth. He feared Heracles more deeply than ever. The meaning of the eighth labor. This labor revealed much about the world Heracles lived in. 1. The most dangerous monsters are often human. Diomedes' cruelty created beasts worse than anything spawned by the gods. 2. Violence breeds violence. The mares became what they were because of their master's corruption. 3. Justice can be harsh but necessary. Heracles did not kill Diomedes out of anger, but to end his tyranny. 4. Redemption requires compassion. After the mares fed on their tyrant, Heracles treated them gently, guiding them toward peace. 5. Heracles' path leads increasingly into darkness. This labor was not about strength. It was about confronting brutality itself. 8 labors completed. 4 remain. And the next would take Heracles into battle against another king one, with herds guarded by a monstrous giant, and a landscape that bent beneath the weight of ancient, primeval power. Labor 9. The Girdle of Hippolyta. By the time Heracles completed his 8th labor, Eurystheus's fear had transformed fully into obsession. The king no longer merely wished for Heracles to fail. He yearned for it, clung to the fantasy that one day the hero would not return from a mission. Every night he imagined himself free of the looming shadow of Zeus's mighty son. His new scheme involved neither monstrous beasts, nor deadly birds, nor savage tyrants. This time, Eurystheus targeted something far more delicate and volatile: politics. He commanded Heracles, "Bring me the magical girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons." A gift sacred to Ares himself, a symbol of leadership among a nation of warrior women unmatched in battle, a treasure they would never surrender willingly. Heracles did not fail to notice the irony. A man sent to demand a prized possession from a powerful queen, a foreigner entering a kingdom that distrusted men, a hero facing a society raised on tales of male treachery. This was not a task of muscle. This was a task of diplomacy, and perhaps of war. But Heracles accepted the labor, as he always did. Who were the Amazons? Before Heracles' journey begins, it is worth knowing his opponents. The Amazons were no myth to the people of the ancient world. They were a nation of fierce warrior women, daughters of Ares, raised in the harsh lands by the Thermodon River. Their society valued strength, discipline, and martial excellence. Men were seldom permitted within their borders. Boys born to Amazons were often sent away to the lands of their fathers. Girls were trained from childhood in the arts of war. They were known to ride horses fearlessly, wield bows longer than a man's height, fight in formation with unmatched precision, and carve out a vast territory no neighboring king dared challenge. Their queen, Hippolyta, was famed not only for her beauty and strength, but also for her wisdom. She wore the girdle of Ares, a magical belt bestowed by the god of war, a symbol of authority, power, and divine favor. To take it from her by force was treason against Ares himself. To ask for it was nearly as dangerous, but Eurystheus demanded it for his daughter, Admete, who wanted it as a prize. So Heracles set sail. Journey across the sea. Heracles gathered a band of companions, heroes, and friends who volunteered to join him on this voyage. Among them were Iolaus, his loyal nephew, Theseus, Prince of Athens, several skilled sailors and warriors, and young adventurers eager to prove themselves. Their ship cut across the Aegean, passing islands both peaceful and wild. Along the way, they confronted storms, pirates, and hostile tribes. At one point, they rescued a city under attack from invading barbarians. At another, they were hosted with great honors by welcoming kings. But their destination never changed. They sailed onward toward the stronghold of the Amazons, Themyscira, a city of towering wooden walls, watchtowers, and wide training grounds where women practiced archery and spear fighting from dawn to dusk. The moment their ship approached the harbor, Amazon sentinels spotted it. Heracles' crew tensed, hands on their weapons, expecting arrows to rain down. But something unexpected happened. The Amazons did not attack. Meeting Hippolyta herself, rode down from the city's gates, mounted on a powerful black horse. Her warriors flanked her in disciplined rows, their armor gleaming, their spears upright. Heracles stepped forward, arms lowered in peace. The queen regarded him carefully, eyes sharp, posture unafraid. "You are Heracles," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "I am," he answered with respect. "You come for my girdle." "I do, but I have not come to steal it, nor to wage war. I ask only for your consent." Hippolyta tilted her head, intrigued. Heracles explained the labor, Eurystheus's demand, and the nature of his servitude. He spoke plainly, sincerely, and without arrogance. Hippolyta listened, her expression softening. Then she surprised everyone, especially her own warriors. "I will give you the girdle," she said, "not because I fear you, but because I admire you. You speak with honor, and honor deserves respect." Heracles bowed deeply. The Amazons murmured in astonishment. This was going far too smoothly, perhaps too smoothly. And indeed, the gods were not yet finished with this story. Hera's treachery far above Themyscira. Hera watched the scene unfold with mounting fury. Every time Heracles triumphed, every time his reputation grew, her hatred of Zeus' mortal son deepened. She would not allow peace. She would not allow diplomacy. She would not allow Heracles to succeed easily. So Hera disguised herself as an Amazon warrior, tall, fierce, with braided hair and a spear in hand. She rode among the ranks of Hippolyta's soldiers and whispered venom into their ears. "Heracles is here to capture your queen. He plans to enslave us. He will destroy Themyscira and steal our treasures. Look, his ship is filled with armed men. Why would they come in peace?" The Amazon warriors stiffened. Hera raised her voice and shouted, "To arms! Defend your queen!" Pandemonium erupted. From the city walls came a barrage of arrows. Warriors mounted their horses and charged the foreigners. The harbor burst into chaos as the Amazons attacked with righteous fury. Heracles reeled back as spears rained down around him. He raised his voice, "Stop! We came in peace!" But no one listened. The deception had worked. War was inevitable. Battle at Themyscira. The Amazons were unmatched in combat. They fought as though their bones were steel, as though their breath came from Ares himself. Arrows flew in deadly arcs. Horses reared and charged. Spears clashed against shields. Heracles' companions struggled to defend themselves without killing the warriors who attacked them. Heracles himself refused to strike down any Amazon unless forced to the brink. He knew this battle was not their fault. But the queen approached, not as an enemy, but as someone trying to stop the chaos. Hippolyta rode into the center of the battlefield, raising her hand. "Wait!" She never finished the sentence. An Amazon, manipulated by Hera's illusion, shouted, "Heracles strikes at our queen!" Suddenly, dozens of women stormed toward Hippolyta, believing she was in danger. In the confusion, Heracles saw warriors preparing to seize their own queen, not to save her, but to use her as leverage. At that moment, Heracles made a decision. A terrible one. A necessary one. He struck Hippolyta down, not because he wished to kill her, but because he believed she would suffer a worse fate as a prisoner of her own enraged people. Heracles lifted the girdle from her body with reverence. Her death weighed heavily upon him, but the battle raged on. Escape from Themyscira, Heracles called out to his crew, "To the ship! We leave now!" The men rushed aboard, pushing off from the harbor as arrows struck the water beside them. Heracles climbed aboard last, the girdle in his hand. The Amazons stood on the shore shouting curses, tears streaming from some of their eyes. Hippolyta had been beloved. Heracles looked back only once. The grief on his face was unmistakable. A hard journey home. The voyage home was somber. No one celebrated. No one laughed. Even Theseus, usually full of energy and bravado, was quiet. Heracles could not shake the feeling that this labor had taken something from him, something more important than glory or triumph. For the first time, he felt the cruelty of divine interference, not just on himself, but on others. Hera had wanted to ruin peace, and she succeeded. Heracles' heart felt heavy, but his duty remained. Eurystheus' reaction. When Heracles returned and presented the magical girdle, Eurystheus' face lit with greedy delight. He snatched the belt away as though afraid Heracles would take it back. "Excellent! The 9th labor is complete," he declared triumphantly. Heracles said nothing. He did not mention the death of Hippolyta. He did not speak of Hera's trickery. He did not voice the guilt that tightened around his chest. Some victories tasted bitter. This was one of them. The meaning of the 9th labor Heracles learned painful truths. 1. Diplomacy can be shattered by a single whisper. Peace is fragile when gods meddle with mortal minds. 2. Strength cannot fix everything. Even he, strongest of mortals, could not prevent tragedy. 3. Not all enemies carry weapons. Hera was the deadliest foe of all because she struck at hearts, not bodies. 4. Heroism sometimes brings sorrow. Heracles gained the girdle, but lost a queen who wished him no harm. 5. Leadership demands sacrifice. Even sacrifices one will never forget. 9 labors were done. 3 remained. The next would lead Heracles into the realm of cattle guarded by a sun-born giant, across scorching lands and distant seas. A labor of endurance, cunning, and confrontation with a monstrous king. Labor X, the cattle of Geryon. With 9 labors completed, some through strength, some through wit, some through bitter sacrifice, Heracles had earned a reputation that reached far beyond the borders of Greece. His name traveled across seas, deserts, and distant kingdoms. Kings feared him, warriors admired him, and ordinary men whispered his deeds around their hearths. But Eurystheus, trembling in his palace, saw every new labor as an unwanted reminder that Heracles still lived, still triumphed, still loomed over him like a walking monument of Zeus's glory. And so the king devised a labor designed to push Heracles farther than ever before, across the very edge of the known world. He commanded, "Bring me the cattle of Geryon." The cattle were sacred. Their owner was monstrous. Their land was farther than any Greek had ever traveled. This was not just a labor. It would become an odyssey. Who was Geryon? To understand the enormity of this task, one must know the master of those cattle. Geryon, a giant born from the bloodline of monsters. The poets said, "He had 3 bodies fused at the waist, or 3 heads upon one massive torso, or 3 souls within one form. His strength was unmatched, his cruelty legendary, his island fortress nearly unreachable. He lived at the far western edge of the world, Erythea, the red island, where the sun set into the ocean each night. Between Heracles and that island stretched scorching deserts, boiling seas, and lands filled with dangers unknown even to gods. To make matters worse, Geryon was protected by 2 terrible guardians. Orthrus, a 2-headed hound, brother of Cerberus, Eurytion, a fearsome giant herdsman, and beyond them all, Geryon himself. Heracles would need every ounce of strength, endurance, and will. The journey begins. Across the Peloponnesus, Heracles set out from Tiryns, with nothing but his club, his bow, his quiver of poisoned arrows, and the lion's skin on his back. The people watched him depart with awe and sorrow. They sensed that this journey was unlike the others. He traveled north across the Peloponnesus, then west toward the coast, where he sought a ship to take him across the sea. But every sailor refused. "Beyond the horizon lies the edge of the earth," they said. "We will not go there." And so Heracles did what he always did. He found his own path. Crossing Libya, the desert of death, Heracles traveled south along the coast of Africa, entering the vast Libyan desert, a land of burning sands and merciless sun. For days he walked beneath a sky without clouds. His water ran low, his lips cracked, his skin burned. At night, freezing winds replaced the scorching day. In this wasteland, Heracles encountered King Antaeus, a giant who challenged every traveler to a wrestling match. Antaeus was unbeatable, for his strength returned each time he touched the earth, which was his mother, Gaia. Heracles understood the trick. He wrestled the giant, lifted him high into the air, away from the earth, and crushed him. Then he continued his march. The Pillars of Hercules. A feat within a feat. At last Heracles reached the westernmost point of the continent, where the mountains blocked his passage to the ocean. With no way forward, he did the impossible. He tore the mountains apart with his bare hands. He created a passage, a strait, that separated Europe from Africa. This would one day be known as the Pillars of Hercules. Even gods might have paused to marvel. Helios, the sun. God intervenes. But the greatest challenge was the heat. Beyond the mountains lay a region where the sun burned so fiercely that even Heracles struggled to breathe. The air shimmered like the surface of molten bronze. His skin blistered, his vision blurred. In desperation and anger, Heracles did something unthinkable. He raised his bow and shot an arrow directly at the sun. Helios, the god who rode his golden chariot across the sky, halted in shock. Then he descended, not in rage, but in admiration. "You are bold, Heracles," Helios said, "and boldness deserves reward." The sun god gifted Heracles a magnificent golden cup, a great vessel Helios himself used to sail across the ocean each night. "Take it," Helios said. "It will carry you over the waters no mortal has crossed." Heracles bowed deeply. He climbed into the cup, and with the wind at his back, he sailed west toward the island of Geryon. Arrival at Erythea, the Red Land. The island rose from the ocean like a blood-red jewel, bathed in the glow of the setting sun. Its cliffs were scarlet stone, its trees were crimson oaks, its soil was as red as wine. There, grazing in wide green pastures, were the cattle of Geryon, enormous beasts with red hides and golden horns, magnificent and divine. But to reach them, Heracles first had to face their guardian, Orthrus, the two-headed hound. From behind a hill thundered Orthrus, the monstrous two-headed dog, fangs bared, eyes blazing. Each head snarled independently, eager to tear the hero apart. Heracles did not hesitate. As the beast lunged, he swung his club with such force that the ground trembled. Orthrus collapsed, skulls shattered. The first guardian had fallen. Eurytion, the giant herdsman. Eurytion, a towering giant with a spear the size of a tree, charged at Heracles. The hero tried diplomacy first. "Stand aside," he said. "I have no quarrel with you. Let me take the cattle, and you may keep your life." But Eurytion, loyal to his master, attacked. Heracles sighed sadly. He drew a poisoned arrow and shot the giant through the chest. Eurytion fell. Heracles advanced. Geryon, the three-formed king. Then Geryon appeared, a monstrous warrior with three bodies joined at the waist, 3 faces, 3 shields, and 3 spears, moving as one terrifying entity. His armor glowed red like the island itself. His voice boomed like 3 voices blended into one. "You killed my dog. You killed my herdsman. And now you seek my sacred cattle." Heracles stood his ground. "I seek only what fate requires." "Then fate ends now." Geryon attacked with the force of a storm. 3 spears flew at once. 3 shields blocked every blow. 3 swords slashed with deadly precision. Heracles was pushed back, step by step. For the first time in many months, he felt the pressure. The raw, overwhelming force of an enemy shaped by divine blood. But Heracles had faced worse. He dodged one spear, blocked another, then drew his bow. Geryon charged. 3 voices roared, "You cannot kill!" Heracles released the arrow. It flew straight, guided by strength and fate. It struck Geryon in the side, where the 3 bodies fused, piercing through all 3 hearts. The giant stumbled, staggered, and fell to his knees. He collapsed with a final thunderous crash. The island fell silent. Heracles had triumphed. Gathering the cattle, Heracles herded the magnificent cattle carefully, driving them into Helios's golden cup. Then he sailed east and returned the vessel to the sun god with thanks. But the journey home would prove just as perilous as the journey there. The long return. A trail of obstacles. Heracles' return to Greece was filled with dangers. 1. Hera sent a gadfly. The goddess, furious that Heracles once again succeeded, sent a monstrous gadfly to sting the cattle. They scattered across the countryside. Heracles spent months gathering them again. 2. Giants attempted to steal the herd. In Liguria, 2 giant sons of Poseidon attacked him. Heracles killed them both. 3. A king tried to claim the cattle by force. In Italy, King Eryx challenged Heracles and lost. 4. Thieves and raiders shadowed him, but none survived the attempt. At last, after crossing half the known world, Heracles returned to Argos with the entire herd. Eurystheus' reaction. Eurystheus came out, saw the cattle, and immediately panicked. "Put them in the courtyard," he barked. "No, take them away." "No, wait, leave some." "No, all must go." He was terrified, confused, overwhelmed. Finally he ordered, "Return the cattle to Hera. Let no Greek keep them." So Heracles sacrificed the animals to Hera, honoring the divine law despite her hatred for him. And the 10th labor was complete. The meaning of the 10th labor. This labor taught Heracles many things. 1. Heroism is endurance. This was his longest, hardest journey. 2. The world is vast. Heracles crossed deserts, seas, and lands unknown. 3. Strength must be paired with diplomacy and wisdom. He tried peace before violence. 4. Even gods may help when least expected. Helios admired his courage. 5. Eurystheus would never stop trying to break him. With 10 labors complete, though Eurystheus counted only 10 of 12 so far, Heracles was nearly at the end. But the next labor would lead him underground, into the realm of the dead, into the shadowy kingdom ruled by Hades, where no mortal was meant to walk. Laborofin, the golden apples of the Hesperides. 10 labors had come and gone. 10 impossible tasks completed. 10 victories that spread Heracles' name across continents. And Eurystheus was terrified. The king's fear had deepened into a twisted fixation. He could not rest, could not sleep. Every night he imagined Heracles returning with yet another triumph, yet another symbol of divine favor. So he devised a labor that even gods hesitated to attempt. A task wrought from the heart of ancient myth. He commanded, "Bring me the golden apples of the Hesperides." To anyone else, the demand would have sounded beautiful, poetic even. But Heracles knew better. For the golden apples did not grow in any ordinary orchard. They were not fruit. They were divine artifacts, and they were guarded by the Hesperides, nymphs of the evening star, a 100-headed dragon born of primordial chaos, and the wrath of Hera, whose garden it was. To take even a single apple without her consent was a crime that could spark war between gods. Heracles bowed his head. He accepted. The apples, a gift for a goddess. Long ago, when Hera married Zeus, the gods showered her with gifts. Among them was a magnificent tree bearing golden apples, a symbol of immortality, beauty, and divine status. The tree was planted in the far reaches of the world, in a hidden garden. Hera assigned guardians to protect it. The Hesperides, her handmaidens, daughters of the night. And Ladon, the dragon, with 100 glittering heads, never sleeping, never blinking, eyes shining like stars. The garden was so secret that even gods had trouble finding it. Mortals, unthinkable. But Heracles was no ordinary mortal. The longest quest begins. For the first time in his labors, Heracles had no clear destination. He did not know where the garden lay. No map existed. No oracle offered simple guidance. So he set out across the world to seek the knowledge. His journey took him further than any before. Even beyond the western realms he crossed, while seeking Geryon's cattle. He traveled through Macedonia, over jagged peaks. Thrace, where he slew river bandits. Illyria, where he rescued a shipwrecked king. Scythia, frozen and hostile. And lands so distant that Greek poets could not name them. He asked every wise ruler, priest, and oracle for information. Most gave only fear and confusion. But at last he found someone who knew, someone ancient, powerful, terrifying. Nereus, the old man of the sea. Wrestling the shapeshifter. Heracles tracked Nereus to a rocky shore where the old sea god slept. His hair was long as seaweed, his beard tangled with shells, his body constantly shifting, fish, lion, water, snake, before settling into an aged human form. Heracles pounced and seized him. Nereus writhed, changing form after form. A serpent, a bird, a wave, a flame, a giant squid, a horse made of seawater. But Heracles held him with unbroken strength. At last, Nereus gasped, "Enough! Enough! Release me, and I will tell you what you seek." Heracles loosened his grip. Nereus, panting, pointed westward. "To reach the apples, you must seek Atlas, the Titan who holds the sky upon his shoulders. Only he knows the way." Heracles thanked him, and the quest continued. Prometheus, the fire-bringer. On his way toward Atlas, Heracles came across another figure of ancient tragedy. Prometheus, chained to a mountain by unbreakable bonds, punished eternally for giving fire to mankind. Every day, an eagle descended to devour his liver. Every night, it regrew. The cycle had lasted for centuries. Heracles watched as the eagle swooped down. He drew his bow. One poisoned arrow flew. The eagle shrieked and fell dead. Prometheus lifted his head weakly. "You have freed me!" Heracles broke the chains with blows of his sword and club. The divine metal shattered at last. Prometheus rose, weary and grateful. "As thanks," he said, "I reveal this. The apples cannot be taken by you. Only the daughters of Night or the Titan who guards them may retrieve them. Seek Atlas and beware his cunning." Heracles nodded. He continued north. Atlas and the burden of the sky. At the end of the world, beyond the cold deserts of the Hyperboreans, Heracles finally found him. Atlas, towering, muscular, ancient, a titan bent beneath the crushing dome of the heavens. His knees dug into the mountain ridge. His shoulders trembled slightly under the weight of the sky itself. He lifted his eyes as Heracles approached. "What mortal dares come here?" "I am Heracles," the hero said. "I seek the golden apples of the Hesperides." Atlas laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "You cannot take them. The dragon Ladon cannot be slain by mortal hands, but I can retrieve them." Heracles saw the gleam in the Titan's eye. "And what would you ask in return?" Atlas grinned. "You will hold the sky for me." Heracles felt a chill, for even he, strongest of mortals, had never imagined taking the weight of the heavens on his shoulders. But he had come this far. "I agree," he said, and Atlas stepped aside. The sky shifted. Heracles braced himself, knees bent, back straight, arms raised. The weight descended. A weight no mortal had ever borne. A weight no god besides Atlas had ever attempted. Heracles gritted his teeth. The sky pressed down like a living mountain. The clouds swirled. The celestial dome groaned. He held. Atlas straightened, rolling his shoulders for the first time in ages. He stretched, cracked his neck, and exhaled with relief. "I shall return soon," he said, and left. While Heracles held the sky, minutes passed, then hours, then perhaps days. Time blurred. The weight was beyond comprehension, beyond agony, beyond reason. But Heracles stood. If he faltered, even for a moment, the sky would collapse. At last, Atlas returned. He carried 3 golden apples in a sack, glowing like captured suns. But he did not hand them over. Instead, he smiled slyly. "You have done well, Heracles. I will take the apples to Eurystheus myself. You may continue holding the sky. Farewell." Heracles did not move. He did not panic. He simply spoke calmly. "Very well, Atlas, but before you go, could you hold the sky for just a moment? Let me adjust my cloak so the weight rests more comfortably." Atlas, without thinking, agreed. He took the sky back into his arms, and in that instant, Heracles grabbed the apples, bowed, and strode away. "Farewell, Atlas," he said. "I thank you." Atlas roared in fury, but could not chase him. Heracles was already gone. The dragon Ladon. Some say Atlas slew Ladon to steal the apples. Others say Heracles, on the way back, slew the dragon with a poisoned arrow, its 100 voices screaming in unison. But the myths disagree, and the gods are silent. All that matters is this: Heracles carried the apples. Return to Eurystheus. After perhaps the longest journey of his life, Heracles returned to Mycenae. He placed the glowing golden apples before Eurystheus. The king stared, terrified and mesmerized. Where did you... How did you... Heracles said nothing. The apples were too sacred to remain in mortal hands. Athena herself appeared, collected them, and returned them to Hera's garden. The labor was complete, the meaning of the 11th labor. This labor showed Heracles: 1. Wisdom matters as much as strength. He outwitted Atlas himself. 2. Compassion is heroic. He freed Prometheus, ending centuries of torment. 3. Knowledge is power. Only by gathering wisdom could he find the garden. 4. Even gods intervene, for better or worse. 5. The world is vast and full of wonders. Heracles had traveled farther than any mortal hero, and now only one labor remained, the most terrifying, the most dangerous, the one no mortal had ever accomplished. Entering the underworld. Labor Tuthine, Cerberus and the underworld. 11 labors had tested Heracles' strength, courage, endurance, cunning, mercy, and resolve. 11 labors had shaken kingdoms, humbled kings, and reshaped the world. 11 labors had made his name a legend in every land touched by the sun. And now came the 12th, the greatest and most dreadful of all. A labor no mortal had ever survived. A task that defied nature itself. Eurystheus commanded, "Bring me Cerberus from the underworld. Not kill him, not defeat him, bring him back alive." Cerberus, the monstrous hound of Hades, guardian of the realm of the dead. A creature with 3 heads, the tail of a serpent, and a mane of writhing snakes. A beast that allowed souls to enter, but never to leave. To face such a creature was almost unthinkable. But the true terror lay not in Cerberus. It lay in the journey itself. Heracles would have to descend into the land of the dead, the underworld, and return alive. No mortal had ever done so, but Heracles was no ordinary mortal. And so, the hero set out for the final time. Preparing for the descent. Before Heracles could enter the underworld, he sought purification and guidance. The oracle at Delphi commanded him to undergo sacred rites and travel to Eleusis, the holy city of Demeter. There, priests initiated him into the Eleusinian mysteries, ancient rites known only to the gods and the initiated. They taught him the pathways of souls, the safe passages, the dangers, and the names of those who ruled the realms below. Armed with this wisdom, Heracles traveled to the southern tip of Greece, to a cave known as Taenarum, one of the gates to Hades. A cold wind blew from the cavern's mouth, though the world outside was warm. The trees bent away from it. Birds did not fly overhead. Even the ocean waves seemed to hush as he approached. Heracles wrapped the Nemean lion's skin tightly around his shoulders. He tightened his grip on his club. He took a deep breath, and he stepped into darkness. The descent into Hades. The air grew colder, thicker, heavier. Light faded behind him. The tunnel spiraled downward into a silence so deep that even Heracles' footsteps sounded muffled. Shadows moved that were not shadows. Whispers brushed past him. The air tasted of earth, metal, and forgotten memories. Finally, the path opened into the asphodel meadows, where countless pale shades drifted across endless fields, souls neither wicked nor heroic, wandering without passion or purpose. They murmured as he passed, "Heracles. Why does he walk among the dead? He is alive. He does not belong here." The shades parted, making way for him. Heracles moved through the mist, unafraid. He soon reached a river that shimmered black as obsidian. The Styx, boundary of oaths and sorrows. The ferryman Charon, gaunt and robed in shadow, guided a small boat along the silent waters. Charon stared at Heracles with hollow eyes. "No mortal living may cross the Styx," he said. Heracles reached into his cloak and produced a token, a golden coin given to him by the priests of Eleusis, blessed for this journey. Charon hesitated, then nodded. "Enter." Heracles stepped into the boat. The river carried him forward. The realm of Hades. On the far shore rose the towering black gates of the underworld. 3 walls encircled the fortress, forged from metal darker than night. Souls wailed beyond them. Torches burned with ghostly blue flames. Before the gates stretched the plains of punishment. Sinners rolling boulders, others chained in fire. Still others endlessly grasping for water that vanished as they approached. Judges passing sentences with cold detachment. Heracles walked forward, his presence commanding silence. Then the earth trembled, the gates shuddered, and from the shadows emerged the guardian of this realm, Cerberus, the three-headed hound. Cerberus stepped forward, enormous and terrifying. 3 massive dogheads, each snarling with dripping fangs, a tail writhing like a venomous serpent, a mane of living snakes hissing and snapping, eyes glowing like hellfire, claws carving deep grooves into the stone. He growled in 3 different tones, low, deep, and bone-chilling. The underworld shook, but Heracles did not flinch. This was the final labor. He would face it head-on. Audience with Hades and Persephone. Before attempting to seize the beast, Heracles sought permission, for even he knew the consequences of acting without leave in the realm of the dead. He approached the throne room, where Hades and Persephone presided. Hades sat rigid, cloaked in shadows. His face was stern, ancient, unreadable. His crown glimmered like obsidian. Persephone beside him shone pale and serene, like moonlight on a frozen lake. Heracles bowed deeply. "Lord Hades, Lady Persephone, I come not to defy your realm, but to fulfill a labor imposed upon me. I ask permission to take Cerberus, alive, to the world above." Hades studied him, his dark eyes piercing. "You seek much, son of Zeus," he said. "Many heroes beg for their lives in this hall, yet you ask to take my guardian." Persephone's voice was soft, but carried the weight of ages. "Would you harm the beast?" "No," Heracles answered. "I would sooner die than injure that which protects your realm. I wish only to borrow him and return him unharmed." Hades considered this. At last he nodded. "You may take him, if you can subdue him without weapon or arrow. Only your strength against his." Heracles bowed again. This was the challenge he expected. It was time. The battle with Cerberus Heracles approached the monstrous hound. Cerberus snarled, all 3 heads snapping with blinding speed. His claws gouged trenches in the ground. His serpent tail lashed violently. Heracles set his feet. He raised his arms. Cerberus lunged. The left head snapped at Heracles' leg. He shifted aside. The right head went for his throat. He blocked with his forearm. The central head struck like lightning. Heracles seized it by the jaws. He wrestled the beast, muscles bulging with straining force. The serpent tail wrapped around his leg, biting into his skin. The other head snapped and tore at the lion skin on his shoulders. Heracles grunted in pain. The underworld shook with the struggle. Shades fled in terror. Even the judges paused their work. The torches flickered. Heracles tightened his grip. He wrapped one arm around Cerberus's central neck, the other gripping the beast's side. His legs locked around the serpent's tail. He squeezed with all his strength, not to kill, but to control. Cerberus roared, all 3 heads crying out in a deafening chorus. Then, slowly, he yielded. The hound collapsed to its belly, snarling but subdued. Heracles stroked the central head once, gently. "It is done," he whispered. bringing Cerberus to the world above. With immense effort, Heracles dragged the subdued beast toward the stairs that led back to the mortal realm. Cerberus resisted at first. No creature of the underworld longed for daylight. But Heracles' strength was absolute. As they reached the entrance, sunlight pierced the darkness. Cerberus squinted and snarled. Heracles coaxed him gently forward. Together they emerged into the world of the living, a sight no mortal had ever seen. Cerberus beneath the open sky. People shrieked and fled. Earthquakes rippled through the land. But Heracles pressed on. He led the monstrous hound to Eurystheus. Eurystheus's terror. The final time. When Eurystheus saw Cerberus, massive, roaring, snapping, fully alive, the king screamed louder than ever before. He retreated faster than he ever had. He tripped, he scrambled, and finally he vanished inside his bronze jar and slammed the lid. "Take it away! Take it away! I release you from all further labors." His voice cracked with terror. Heracles smiled faintly. The labors were complete. He gently returned Cerberus to the underworld, where the beast trotted back to Hades' side with 3 heads held high. Hades nodded in approval. "You have done what no mortal could," he said. Heracles bowed and returned to the world above, free. The meaning of the 12th labor. This final labor revealed everything Heracles had become. 1. Master of life and death. He entered the underworld and returned alive, unbroken. 2. More than mortal. No ordinary man could restrain Cerberus with bare hands. 3. Respected even by gods, Hades himself granted him passage. 4. Unmatched in courage, Heracles did not fear death nor plead for mercy. 5. Purified through suffering. With this labor, his redemption was complete. Heracles had faced monsters, gods, kings, curses, and the boundaries of existence, and he triumphed. The 12 labors were finished, his legend eternal.